Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the subcommittee for the coordination and collaboration of the Kansas Cybersecurity Task Force. With us today, we have Bruce, and I'm probably gonna do not so well on your last name.
It's a hard C. Forget the H, so it's Cladney.
Cladney, okay.
But I go by Bruce.
Bruce Cladney from the Kansas Association of Counties, and then also Eric Sartorius from the Kansas League of Municipalities to come and present to the subcommittee on just what they do, how they interact with the localities that they represent, and kind of work through with us maybe some ways we can kind of leverage them in furthering a partnership from the cybersecurity perspective. So I'd like to welcome both Bruce and Eric to the conversation. Don't know if one of you has a preference on who goes first and kind of talk about yourself, but the floor is yours.
Go right ahead, Bruce. I'm trying to figure out my camera does not want to work.
Okay. All right. I don't mind doing that. No problem. So good morning, folks. My name is, as Jeff had said, Bruce Cladney, Executive Director for the Kansas Association of Counties. I've been here for going on 2 years now. And as the name implies, we are an association that deals with all of the counties across the state of Kansas, minus one. So we have 104 out of the 105 counties in the state members. And we are basically an educational resource for them. During the legislative session, we advocate on behalf of them at the state capitol. We look out for their best interest, trying to help them do the best job they can, running the local county governments, doing the best job they can for the citizens where they live, work, and play. And we also do, we are getting ready to have our annual conference coming up in October. We'll be at the Overland Park Convention Center the 18th through the 20th, and we're going to have about 300 plus attendees there. We've got over 80 vendors coming to the show, so it's going to be a great event post-pandemic, hopefully. So basically, in a nutshell, we do work very closely with our county government structures. We reach out to them proactively via newsletters and things like that. And then we also act reactively. So in the case of doing Zoom webinars and other types of outreach programs on an as-needed basis. And so I'm looking forward to working with you folks here for the next few minutes this morning, and then hopefully we can answer questions and have conversations that help you do what you're trying to do, and we can do it in partnership. And so with that, Eric, I'll toss it over to you if you got your camera working.
Don't have the camera working, so we're just going to go as is because I don't want to restart. Eric Sartorius, Executive Director of the League. I've been with the League for a little over 7 years now, and in and around local government in Kansas for about 20 years. Much like Bruce's organization, we represent cities in the state of Kansas. Over half of those cities are under 500 in population, and actually 113 or 15 of the 626 are under 100 in population. So a lot of the organizations that we represent have one, maybe two employees in their city hall, and there are several that don't have a city hall at all. So in terms of cybersecurity, we have folks with pretty limited capacity and limited knowledge and experience.
Wow.
And I'll again open the floor to the rest of the subcommittee members. I've got a handful of questions for both of you. Really, our goal of this subcommittee is kind of identify ways we can collaborate with the various stakeholders in the state and coordinate efforts across a range of issues, from helping respond to incidents, to just sharing information, to helping find ways to leverage resources. The whole list of things we're trying to accomplish. Things if finding ways to pool resources to maybe help out folks. So are there some specific challenges that they've expressed to either of you that they're trying to overcome specifically with cybersecurity? Is it just a need for more knowledge? Is it a need for more partnerships, things like that?
I'll jump in first, Eric, and say, honestly, folks, I think this is probably one of those issues that we need to start working on. I say we, meaning our organization, KAC, needs to start working on a little bit more closely and intentionally about. a little bit of the history is 2 years ago, we actually had a conversation with the state, and we were going to start some of this work back in 2019, early 2000. And then, as you well know, the pandemic came, and a lot of this stuff kind of went by the wayside, and we all jumped to fighting the pandemic. And so I have to admit, over the past year and a half to 2 years, I've had informal conversations. You hear it through the grapevine. I talked with the insurance carrier that covers a lot of our counties. K-Work and K-Camp are the two organizations, and got a lot of interesting feedback from them, because they are dealing with a lot of these cybersecurity issues at the county level. So we do have counties getting hit. In fact, it was in the newspaper just the other day that one of our counties got hit, and they're trying to figure out the ramifications and just how bad their system was compromised. And so we know that it's going on, and we know that there's a need there. So hopefully moving forward, the work that you folks are doing, we would certainly be able to participate in and piggyback on and offer any sort of help that we can. So to truly go back to the question that you're asking, Jeff, I don't have an actual answer for you right now. It's okay, this is what our counties need. They need A, B, and C, X, Y, and Z right this very minute, because I just have not had an opportunity to really delve into the issue with them specifically, outside of just what I'm hearing from the outside in.
Yeah, I'd say here's what we see with cities. By and large, and I'm talking, I'll say our cities under 500, probably cities under 1,000, and certainly cities under 100, minimal awareness that this is a thing, minimal belief that it's real or something that would come to them, kind of the attitude, why would anybody care about us or bother with us? Many kind of an overwhelmed feeling. Don't have any idea of where to begin on this. And then almost as quickly, we have very tight budgets, don't have any money to expend in this direction. Cities that run municipal utilities, I would say, have a greater awareness and a recognition. And some of them with the American Rescue Plan Act funds that are coming directly to cities. I know some of them are looking to use at least some of those funds in a way to try and beef up security surrounding their utilities.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges we've identified is there are so many stakeholders here in the state at various levels, and how do we reach them? And so kind of going back to both of your missions, do you guys have things like listservs or things of that nature to distribute messaging to them as it pops up, things like that? Or would that be an appropriate avenue for things to come from the center down out through organizations like yourselves? Or would it better be received, and as again, this is, just kind of exploring, better received directly from the state or other stakeholders, or filtered kind of through you as kind of another, we know because we get the alert, what we call alert fatigue. If you're getting the message 16 times, you start ignoring them, just because it's over and over, and trying to find ways to have effective communication. So is that kind of something you guys could possibly help facilitate with, et cetera?
Yeah, I would say definitely so. That is our goal. That is our mission, is to help our counties do their job, do it well, do it effectively and efficiently. And so we are in constant contact with our members. And so I have to admit that our emailing lists are very hard to keep up to date, because we do have turnover at the county level. And so as people leave and new people come on, sometimes we hear about it, sometimes we don't. And so it takes a little while to get to the email to the right person. But we do communicate on a regular basis, and we try to target that communication to the people that are most appropriate and the people that are in most need of that type of information. So in instances like this, when it comes to cybersecurity, we certainly would focus on those folks that have connections to that process. There's really no reason to send a blanket email to all of our membership if it's something very specific to this issue that we're talking about. But at the same time, we certainly are amenable to hosting a webinar, just like what we're doing here, and getting the word out, especially to kind of maybe introduce, if you're going to roll something out and you're wanting buy-in, you're wanting, support, and you're wanting an educational campaign, we certainly wouldn't be opposed to partnering with you all and doing some of this type of proactive outreach to our counties and at least getting that word out there and maybe getting the right person on board. If we haven't identified them, go ahead and solicit from the county members who would be the right contact person, who would be the person that would most benefit or be in charge of this type of issue, and get them onto a listserv, get them, connected to you, get them connected to us. And as you start developing your programming and needing to get stuff out and wanting to have more, pointed communications with them, we would certainly be able to do that and help you all do that, because we definitely think that this is a very important issue moving forward, because it's only going to get worse, I believe, as we move forward into the next decade or so.
Jeff, we have a variety of venues, a weekly email out to members, magazine that's published 10 times a year. We do have listservs. Webinars are also things that could be useful. I understand the message overload. I think some of our training with members is to get you to be seen as a trusted source of information, so that we're not having to reiterate everything you say or pass it along, because it's overwhelming, the amount of stuff that we are requested to share. But at the same time, how we get folks to understand kind of the structure there, so that they know if something is coming from the state on this issue, it's something to read and not be frightened to click on a link on. It kind of swings both ways. There's an amazing amount of junk that gets sent to us and our members. So how we get you all to be a trusted voice, I think, is key. And Bruce's suggestion, co-branding some webinars or something like that would certainly be options.
Mm-hmm. Good point, Eric.
And that's kind of like, yeah, I'm assuming, does the league hold some sort of conference or convention as well?
Yeah, we do. We have a conference coming up in 2 weeks, and actually one of our sessions at conference this year is focused on cybersecurity and focusing them on kind of the rudimentary and entry level how to develop a cybersecurity plan. So that and trying to do that in a manner that recognizes budget and competency limitations and knowledge limitations at our individual level.
Bruce, this is Jay.
Yeah.
Eric just answered my question that I was going to have for both of you. What about the counties? Are you going to have anything on cybersecurity at your upcoming meeting?
I do not believe that we have specifically scheduled a talk on that one this year. 2 years ago, as I said, when we were having these initial conversations, we were actually planning to do some work with our county commissioners at their association meeting. That was in the works. And then once we didn't hold our annual conference last year, we did not have that conversation. And then this year we've scheduled a couple of other important issues that have popped up, mainly SB 13 and dark store theory are the two issues that we're going to be discussing as an organization there. So there's absolutely no reason why we can't host a meeting in the future. We just didn't plan for one this year. It just kind of got swept off the table, if you will, for some other issues that we're trying to battle this year. So, but this certainly will be brought back up, and we'll do something with it moving forward, especially in light of the task force and all the work that you're doing. You'll be at a point, I'm sure, to where you'll have some things that you need to get out to counties and cities alike.
And Eric, you mentioned the folks in the smaller cities that deal with utilities. This past week, I presented down in Wichita at the Kansas Electric Cooperatives. They just had their IT people come in, and they had a 2-day seminar on cybersecurity. Obviously, I just did a very short presentation because Bill wimped out and I had to take it. Got that, Bill? And I presented what the Kansas Intelligence Fusion Center does, but not ICE, but INA, pardon me, DHS INA presented and the KBI presented. So have you worked at all with any of those agencies in your presentation that's upcoming, or how did you structure what you've got coming up?
No, sir, we did not. I'm trying to see if I can pull up who exactly we have presenting. The Intelligent Fusion Center, is that the group out of Wichita State? No,
this is the Kansas Intelligence Fusion Center. You actually have 3 people on this call that work with the Fusion Center, and it works strictly at the classified level. Okay. And it's through the Adjutant General as the Homeland Security Advisor for the state of Kansas.
I see. No, we've not had those, and I believe Kansas Municipal Utilities has had more trainings for their water and electric operators. That's interesting that KEPCO had that, and I'll probably do a little digging there on what their seminars look like.
It wasn't KEPCO, it was KEC.
Oh, KEC. Gotcha. Sorry.
That's all right. It's alphabet soup, but yeah, that was kind of what I was wondering, is if you had another thing that I was wondering is whether or not you had worked with either Kansas Municipal Utilities. I assume Colin is still down there. I haven't talked to him in a long time. Yep. He and I talked years ago about a way to maybe get them involved in greater cybersecurity efforts. Now, obviously, it becomes much more important than 5 or 6 years ago when Colin and I were talking. But especially since you mentioned that you have some cities that have smaller utilities. So what I hear you saying is you maybe haven't worked with those cities, but it sounds like Colin's organization may be working with those folks on their security issues.
Exactly. I don't want to speak specifically for them, but at least on the utility side, where I think the most critical concerns are, as you see some of the hacks and uses, such as in Florida with the water system, and even here in Kansas, that's really brought to the forefront for them the utility side of cybersecurity.
And Jeff, that's, when we were talking about people that we maybe should see if we could get to talk to, I think Colin would probably be one to add to that list with Kansas Municipal Utilities. They do similar work to what Eric and Bruce do, or Colin does similar work. But it sounds like maybe he's been somewhat active in this arena. So maybe it'd be good to have him come in and talk. And then Angela Howard at the Kansas Electric Cooperatives was the one that organized the 2-day event. So maybe it would be beneficial to see what KEC is doing from a utility perspective, as a cooperative utility perspective as well.
And I mean, with with a lot of these and kind of seeing some definitely ways we can try and build some synergies, kind of, I don't want to say the pyramid approach, but for messaging pieces, because one of the efforts we've undertook is there's a lot of capabilities we've discovered just going through this effort here in Kansas that we're just finding out, even about some of our other state agencies that we weren't aware of and things like that. And so again, how do we continue that messaging? And things like the new capabilities that KBI can bring to the table, the things that are happening out in the regions, institutions from the education perspective, they're all eager to find homes for interns, and we know there's needs in counties and cities for both IT and cybersecurity, and what does kind of models look like that, and how does that work? So, no, Jay, I think we can definitely get in touch with those organizations as well, and again further our collaboration even internally and how the best is to approach that, and kind of bringing you to the table is what are some of the best approaches for messaging working? Is it us participating in conferences or workshops, things like that, or is it just continue to send communication out to you on things we can do and assist with, when something does happen, and that's kind of one of the other questions, maybe a pulse on the attitude towards the state from the counties and municipalities levels to provide assistance if something were to happen. We do know with some organizations there's hesitancy to report things for fear of finger pointing, et cetera. And if that's some of the issues, how do we address that messaging? So no, we just want to help. We're here to help the citizens of Kansas, and that's our objective. We're not here to point fingers. It can happen to anybody and everybody type
Right.
thing. So what is kind of the pulse on what the state can do to help for the counties and cities?
I think drafting or crafting a uniform message, maybe that includes best management practices, things to that nature, and then also talking about having a uniform plan, as Eric was talking about, helping his municipalities draft disaster plans or whatever, response plans to an attack, making sure that those types of things are in place, and working with counties on my end, working with counties to make sure that they have something like that in place, and having templates that they can work from and that sort of thing if they don't already have something in place, which I'm assuming. I've never really polled our counties to find out exactly how many do have something, but I would imagine most of our larger counties probably do. And I would imagine that probably all of them would have some sort of response. What do you do? Even if it's just pick up the phone and call the insurance carrier, because there was some sort of ransomware that has been now downloaded and our computers are locked up. What's the first thing you do? Call the insurance carrier and bring them into it. Because I know that's what David Luke with K-Camp has said to me. It's happened more than once. They've been brought in on issues and try to resolve the issue. So, Eric, what are your thoughts?
We've been over the past several years trying to grow that awareness, both among the elected, because if you don't have elected recognizing this is a problem, it's not going to get funded. So in our magazine in 2018, we did a cover story on cybersecurity, sharing basic terms and how to put basic plans in place, as well as national resources that they had and were available to them. And then last summer, we had another magazine with a series of articles, including a best practices that focused on an incident in Butler County, a legal forum with respect to managing risk if there's a data breach, and then an infographic on phishing and creating strong passwords. And that's we always make our infographics downloadable and available to cities so that they can distribute those to all employees. So that's where we've been a bit. Standardization probably never hurts, or a template probably never hurts for 50% plus of our members. And then once you get into the folks that are 2,000 or 3,000, particularly if they have a municipal utility, I would say they're a little bit more up to speed and would have a process in place, but I've not specifically checked on that.
Jeff, this is Bill. I've got a question for the gentleman.
Yes, go ahead.
I've been working with the guys who are the administrators of DHS grant money across the various DHS regions across the state. And they've been getting grant money from DHS for many, many years. The Homeland Security Advisor this last year, when DHS dictated that the regions reallocate the funds that they're receiving to 7.5% towards cybersecurity, the HSA in Kansas said that he wanted to go further, and he is telling the regions they need to reallocate 25% of their grant funding towards cybersecurity. My questions, and they're having trouble figuring out how to do that. My question for Bruce and Eric, have you all worked with these DHS grant fund managers across the state out in the counties previously on other capabilities that have been developed using this funding?
I have not. I'm not certain who they are affiliated with or how those. I really am not aware of that structure.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with Eric. Being here for 2 years, I have not learned all the players and have gotten into all of those conversations that are going on. And so I'd have to say that I'm not familiar, but I certainly would welcome to have conversations to find out where we are and what needs to be done. There's no doubt about that. So that's a good question, sir. Yes.
So the HSA was involved with some of that rescue money being allocated to Kansas and to implement additional broadband capabilities across the state. Sure. And so the impetus for him to want to move that spend to cybersecurity is that he's concerned that critical infrastructure in the rural areas of Kansas is not ready to defend their cybersecurity infrastructure. And so he's very keen on using this money to reach out across the state to, number one, educate these owners and operators of critical infrastructure. And if you're not familiar, there's 16 sectors, which include water and electricity and communications and government. There's it pretty much is a broad a swath that includes infrastructure. But he wants to, first of all, educate them on cybersecurity, and then after that educational process is done, then give them the means by which to do self-assessments to evaluate their own defensive architecture. Mm-hmm. And then once they do the self-assessments, then they would be equipped to fill in the gaps in their architecture. And at that point in time, maybe a third phase would be to start doing exercises to actually test that. So those mechanisms are, I guess I should say, are possibly coming your way. Mm-hmm. And they may be reaching out to you. And for this task force, we just need to be aware that that's happening and make sure that what we do is in concert with those efforts. So I was just curious if you guys were aware of that. I think a lot of that money in the past has been spent in the areas of emergency management at the county level, but with this new emphasis, it's going to be broader and take in a much more. Actually, elections is another area that I forgot to mention, is a sector that we want to touch with this education and assessment improvements on cybersecurity.
Well, we would certainly welcome contact with them. When you mention emergency management, that kind of can vary across the state in terms of how much county emergency management folks reach down to the municipal level. So if there's stuff out there and cities need to be involved, we would love to be able to facilitate all that.
And this is Jeff Max. And I do know, now that I'm thinking about in terms of kind of what some of those groups are that Bill's talking about. So there's some affiliated with like the 911 Council and the regions from all the different dispatch centers, whether they're county or city run, things like that. I'm pooling for self-assessments and things like that. So I know there's some additional avenues like that. And there's a state interoperability committee as well that kind of has some other outreaches to the counties and through different avenues. And so, that's probably one of our challenges too, is identifying what are the appropriate swim lanes to work through, et cetera, that's the most effective. And to also Bill's point, there is recently another potential cybersecurity grant funding mechanism coming out through federal legislation. If it wasn't passed, it's very likely to pass already. And so again, kind of pooling those resources, I think is one of the recommendations we've got from our city representative, Mike Made out of Wichita, about finding ways to pool that so folks can get the best bang for their buck in terms of the scarce resources for cyber.
So if I may jump in a second and ask and kind of show a little bit of my ignorance, if I haven't already done that, but on this issue, are there no minimum standards? Are there no minimum requirements that county government and or city government is held to when it comes to cybersecurity? Because I know from the standpoint, we're tied into the state system. There's lots of different avenues, and that's what's kind of interesting when people in these smaller communities and smaller counties say, well, we're not worried. Why are they going to come after us? Well, they're coming after you to get into the bigger system. They're using the small fish to get to the big fish. And so they're really, so it's up to the individual counties to protect themselves and to protect that link between the county and the state's systems, huh?
Yeah, from a governance perspective, there is no requirement specifically overarching, whether through statute or through some sort of other policy straight away. Statute would probably really be the only way that forces requirements onto counties and cities that say these are the minimum cybersecurity standards you must meet. Now, I believe some of the agencies have specific agreements with the counties. For example, I don't know the detail of it, but I believe there's an agreement between the state with Department of Revenue to the counties that do like driver's licensing. These are the minimum requirements you must meet to connect or to do this function.
Okay.
And I do believe there's some like that, but it doesn't say, the entire county must abide by. It's just usually that specific section doing that processing of that work that has access to that specific system. Now we are seeing some states implement some things similar of nature. I think like the state of Texas has mandated all government entities must do cybersecurity awareness training for their employees, and they have to report that back to the state. I think I can't remember if it's like the state of New Hampshire has actually done something for the K through 12, saying all school districts must pick a cybersecurity standard and follow it, and then they have to. I don't know what the reporting mechanism on that, but we are seeing some of that crop up, but there isn't any of that here in Kansas specifically. So
is there intention to get us down that path, down that road? I mean, is that the work of this organization, or is that
it might be to make some
determined?
recommendations, and that might be something where the long-term goal to work through the partners to come up with, because we also want to be cognizant of not, using the stick to try and get to our end state. We do not want to take that approach in anything we do. And again, my office's purview is strictly executive branch, but the problem is bigger and it affects everybody. So we got to think outside of our swim lanes a little bit. So that's where we're working through you to kind of get the pulse on what the counties and municipalities are interested in, so we can craft recommendations appropriately, et cetera.
Gotcha. Well, I definitely think that moving forward, as we uncover more about what's going on and what's needed to happen, I do know that counties get very leery of unfunded mandates. So as we move forward with any sort of cybersecurity, requirements or that type of thing, if it's going to cost money, then ultimately, who's going to pay for that? You know what I mean? Because that happens time and time again, where the state will say, okay, you guys need to start doing this, but we're not giving you any money, and that costs money, and then we get yelled at for raising property taxes, which, we're going through right now. So I'm getting off track a little bit, but I'm just thinking long-term as we move forward.
That is very much one of the concerns, and even being aware of when we've had some language in bills that pertain just to kind of state, connection fees and things like that were particular to the state. We have people expressing concern from the counties and municipalities that if that's going to affect them, we can't support whatever this is, even though it's specific to the state. And so we're very much cognizant of that issue. And that's, at least our intention is find ways where we can work together to accomplish what the end state is.
Right.
And that's just better protecting Kansas citizens.
Mhm.
So
I agree.
Bill, the managers of the funds that you were talking about, are those state employees or are they county employees?
I think typically they're county employees. I was working with the Northeast region, and the two gentlemen, one was from Franklin County and the other one was from Shawnee County, and the Northeast region, with regard to this DHS grant funding, covers 23 counties in northeastern Kansas. I'm not terribly familiar with those regions, but that's who I was talking to yesterday. My only role in this is to help them, provide them with some guidance with the projects that they are submitting for funding by the program. And by the way, Jay, to your earlier comment about, I'll just have to say, if I had feelings, they'd be hurt.
Oh, darn. Okay. So I think there are, if I understand you, there are presentations that come from the counties and then they funnel up to somebody at the state level who then ultimately sends them to the HSA. Would that be correct?
yeah, there is a grant process that is, I believe, managed by the HSA, but it's administered through Highway Patrol, I believe, as the ones that collect the information and things like
I
that.
think
So
that's right.
and with some of those specifically, and this is where kind of the education piece is, you have to have filled out to get the NCSR, the National Cyber, I have to go remember, but it is a DHS survey that you have to fill out and submit to even be eligible. And so again, it's as we have those things, communicating that out, that you need to fill these out as part of your process to submit for grants and things like that. So
Yeah.
It might, in terms of people who.
Go ahead, Bill.
Go ahead, Jay.
Well, go ahead. This is the problem with Zoom, right?
I was just going to say that Jeff, it might be another entity that we might want to hear from, just so we stay the direction that we're going is complementary to what's already in place. That's all I was going to say.
And to that, I would add, it would be helpful probably to Bruce and Eric both, maybe more so to Bruce if they're county officials, but it might be helpful to know who is in that loop when we're talking about that funding. But I agree, Bill, it would probably be beneficial to have somebody talk to us about what it is that those regions do and kind of how they do it. Yes, I was involved in it for years, but I've been out of the legislature now for 7 years. So I'm sure it's changed over that period of time. So I'm not sure exactly how it works right now. And I think it would help us maybe a little bit to know what it is that they're doing. Maybe they're doing some of what we think needs to be done, but we just don't know that it's happening.
The one thing that I can say is that the regions, they've been using this grant money for many years to develop and maintain capabilities across the state. And the new mandates of the 7.5% and the 25% are creating challenges for them. And so maybe if we coordinate closely enough, the powers that be that are going to administer this new money, perhaps they can be complementary enough to where it reduces the impact across the state for all of that funding.
That'd be super. It's from the city perspective, it would be really good to understand what the program is and who is eligible. If it's only counties, and it's a short conversation, but if it is cities as well, and the edict has been made to expand using these funds for cybersecurity, then I think you have a lot of folks who would be interested in it, and I'd want to make sure that cities are being made aware of that, and we're not taking a chance on it only getting halfway down the chain.
Right, and that's what we're gonna try to help those regions reach out to all of the critical infrastructure sectors. And so let's just say we're going to set up some a training at a central location for cybersecurity awareness. We want to make sure that all of critical infrastructure in that region and area is aware and invited to come to that training to get the most bang for the buck for these scarce security dollars that we've acquired.
That'd be awesome.
And it might get even, I don't want to say complicated because that's not the right word, but if that new federal cybersecurity grant program comes down through FEMA as well, there'll be a whole nother pot of money to kind of manage and administer to go out to the folks. And again, I believe NGA has a lot of information on this, but it does follow kind of that 80-20 rule. So 80% of whatever Kansas as a whole gets goes out to localities, whether county or municipality, critical infrastructure associated with those or not. And I don't know all the details, but I mean, there's some significant opportunity here potentially in the future. So I definitely think I don't know, from the task force perspective, I'm kind of seeing more of a recommendation on potentially a cyber grants coordinator type position or type role that is assigned to somebody to help manage that.
Jeff, there is a new position coming on board under the HSA. I believe that position will start January 1, and it's a deputy HSA position who is going to help the regions work on reallocating their funding. And so that person may be a good place to do this coordination.
That's good. This conversation has been great. I don't specifically have any more questions at the moment for you two gentlemen. You're more than welcome to stick around. I don't know if the other members of the committee have any questions. I know John and Steve from NGA, you guys are joining a bit late, but on the line we have with us our representative for the Association of Counties and then our representative from the League of Municipalities in terms of partnerships and things like that. Do you have any questions on, or suggestions on how we might better approach partnering with them that you've seen other states do? Kind of putting you on the spot right as you join, but prior to us moving on to kind of our next task, I want to get your input.
Hey Bruce, and
hi John.
Hey Eric, nice seeing you again. Sorry I'm late. We were on the cyber disruption response task force, so I missed your presentations, but I know that we've worked with you this past summer on that survey with all the different local municipalities and county officials on their cyber responses and so some of those different cyber posture. So I think that's a good step, and I think honestly continuing to build those relationships between the state, between your two associations, and then your members. That's always a good step forward. And I would also, I mean, there's a few states that have, I think one of the ways that we base that survey, and forgive me if I'm repeating things that you've already said, I do apologize, but we did base a lot of, one, I think some of the questions of the survey, as well as some of the reasons for posting the survey, was based on a lot of the work that Massachusetts did back in 2019 with their municipal association, and the work that Governor Baker's team did with that, just trying to get a sense of the landscape at the municipal level, their incident response capability, their plans, things like that. Yeah, hard to say right now if that's, I guess, what the direction the state looks to go in, but I would just say continuing to kind of have these discussions. Maybe if there's opportunities for the state to join in on some of those, if there are monthly calls, things like that. I know other states have been kind of either using the associations as that vehicle to help organize some of the local officials, or to kind of at least convene them. That's always a helpful way too.
Gotcha. John, have you all put together, accumulated all those responses, and was there a report ever pulled together from that? And if so, can we get a copy?
So I have the two spreadsheets that you have sent over, and thanks for both of you for including a pretty good summary of some of that data. That'll be helpful, but I've passed it along to the state, but Jeff, you and I can talk about how we can best look at some of that data, and if there is a way to kind of pull together some of the different findings from it into a 2 or 3 pager.
Okay, thank you. Just curious what, after encouraging everybody to do it, it'd be nice to see what was overall said.
Yeah, that's a good point. Probably helps with any sort of future effort.
Definitely. So, just part of it is being aware of the sensitivity of the nature of responses in that as well. We'll make sure we do it in an appropriate fashion as well. Jay, Bill, do either of you have any additional questions?
I do not.
I do not at this time.
Eric and Bruce, very much appreciate your time. You're more than welcome to kind of stay on and kind of hear what we're talking about and kind of see some of the things we started putting together as recommendations. Our first report is due to the governor here in a little under 2 weeks. So we're kind of the home stretch of our initial recommendations. Again, these are kind of some high level recommendations. Like I said, you're free to kind of stick around, listen, see what we've got going on, kind of the direction that we as a task force and subcommittee have kind of started identifying, for that whole state approach. So with that, Allie, right, could you share your screen, or Cheryl or Sarah? Share your screen and see through that. And again, really appreciate your time, Bruce and Eric. We know this is something that will be a big effort and a long-term effort, and we just want to get the work going and build that partnership. So,
well, I appreciate. Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
I appreciate being included. I'll try and stick on for a couple minutes. I have a couple others I got to jump to, but I'll listen as long as I can.
Yeah, I appreciate the invitation to speak with you all and work with you this morning, and I look forward to the work that you folks are doing. And I am going to jump off because we're getting ready to host over 170 members talking about ARPA funds and addressing ARPA and community health. So on to the next thing. So appreciate it though, folks.
All right. Well, thanks again.
All right. Bye-bye.
All righty. So Jay and Bill, I don't know if you've had a chance to kind of look through what Al had sent out as part of the meeting announcement as attachments. So what we had done is we had gone back through meeting notes and kind of try to pull out recommendations that were kind of talked about or discussed, where it was flat out said as this is probably a good recommendation, or where we started having dialogue. We tried to kind of pull some of those out and kind of put them into kind of a framework of recommendations. Again, these aren't concrete; these were just things we kind of pulled out and documented. There's probably things we've missed, things we need to expand upon, etc. I tried to, they're framed in both kind of near term goals, which will be kind of, we can probably get something done in here like 0 to 6 months, for whoever it might be assigned to, and then longer terms, which would be anything longer than that. We also kind of put in a common recommendation section of things that kind of were talked about in all the subcommittees, and kind of to highlight that they were discussed in multiple areas. One of the other subcommittees looking through has talked about, well, we might still want to pull a little bit out specifically to each subcommittee because there's certain aspects of, for example, the state assessment of the landscape that are specific to certain areas to maybe reinforce that, et cetera, or certain areas where we want to clearly identify things with localities or critical infrastructure, et cetera. Kind of these are by no means final. And as like I said, feedback will be important moving forward. But as we kind of start working through, if we can, Allie will kind of, who's sharing? Sarah will kind of put some notes in there about what we discussed or things we should add, or even if some additional recommendations just came out of this discussion today, which I think might have, kind of start approaching from there. So. Thoughts and comments? We both had a chance to look at the document.
First, I have to find my unmute button. Go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to say, I looked at an earlier version. I've not been able to look at this one, but I'm impressed with how you guys have put this together, and it looks great.
I've gone through this, not thoroughly, but I've gone through it. And I do think, Jeff, that we came up with some more ideas just in talking with Eric and Bruce about a couple, like I mentioned, a couple more organizations that appear to be out there doing some things. One that I did know about, one I didn't know about. And I think it would be helpful to maybe bring them in. And I'm not sure exactly how you want to put that in there, but KMU and KEC obviously are very interested in this issue, and it would probably be helpful if we knew what they were doing as we make our recommendations on what other folks ought to do.
Yeah, no, and I think that's appropriate. And part of it, I go back is do we think we're finding most of them, or do we need to go even that step further and continue that assessment, or are there any more out there?
Honestly, well, in a way, one way you could do this, I suppose, is to look at who the lobbyists, the list of lobbyists, and you would find out whether or not there are any other ones that appear to be, just from what they say, working on this, who they say they represent, appear to be working on this issue. And for who's ever typing, I obviously don't enunciate very clearly. It's KM as in Mark, U, which stands for Kansas Municipal Utilities, and KEC, Kansas Electric Cooperatives. Yep, that's it.
Thank you.
I missed it, Sarah. What?
Oh, I just said thank you for correcting me.
Oh, no. Yeah, like I said, I just wasn't enunciating clearly.
So it seems to me that because we have such an aggressive deadline for submitting this first version, I think we would behoove us to identify which touch points we've found to initiate communications with, and then we need to in our work product indicate that we continue to look for additional touch points across the critical infrastructure sectors, because we'll be beating the bushes for a long time to find all of them. If we ever find all of them, I think we need to represent that we're leaving the door open to include to be all inclusive to critical infrastructure entities across the state.
Yes. Again, one kind of thing, I know you hit on it, Bill, a little bit. I think it should be a valid recommendation, though, is based on that conversation, is identifying somebody who can specifically address cybersecurity grants in that process. And again, whether it lands with the deputy HSA or somebody, like we did create a cybersecurity position within state focusing on communicating, coordinating, collaborating, if it falls under that. I do think that's important to call out, because that will be probably a very valuable effort with the localities. And especially if that federal cybersecurity grant program comes down the pipe. That'll be huge.
One of in what you sent out, you have highlighted ensure local government employees take cybersecurity awareness training. Should this include education and private sectors? Can you elaborate a little bit on the question?
So that was a question from Mike Maida in the city, which I think when we started talking about it, it was just kind of focused on the government level. I don't know if there would be a way the state can force that on private sectors, other than if they have contracts with the state or municipalities or things like that. And that's kind of the question for debate. I still think it should be definitely something to look at from the government perspective at whatever level it is something that we should be, our citizens are entrusting us something we approach, because cybersecurity is everybody's responsibility. So,
well, since they've always, for years and years, they've said that private sector holds 85% of the critical infrastructure. There is kind of a duty. I don't think that we could implore them to do cybersecurity awareness training, but I think that especially in those smaller populated areas where they're very challenged, I think that they would gladly come to awareness training if it was offered to them. So I'm not sure. I think it may be a build it and they will come, rather than telling them they have to do it is probably might be a good strategy.
Yeah, to Bruce and Eric's point, obviously many times I heard over the years, well, who's supposed to pay for this? You're making this requirement on us. Now, who's going to pay for it? So we might be able to suggest, as you say, Jeff, suggest to private industry, or even mandate if they have a contract with the state of Kansas, and that's probably not a bad idea. But if we don't make it absolutely uniform throughout the state as far as counties and cities go, then they can home rule out of it. And you don't want to get into that kind of a mess. And so I'm not sure you want to get into a mandate either, just a strong recommendation. And as you say, hopefully the funding bill will pass, and they would then be communicated to by whomever is in charge of that funding program on the state level, that here's some funds available for your city maintenance worker that's also your IT engineer to show up to learn about cybersecurity. Long way of saying, without funding, better not mandate.
You know, it just occurred to me back in a previous career, I carried a water treatment license, not license, certificate from the state. One thing that we might look into is any of those critical infrastructure sectors that already require some sort of a competency certificate from the state might be a good place to mandate cybersecurity training. I'm kind of just throwing that out there for discussion. What do you guys think?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think that's a great idea. You know, a lot of them, there are certain certifications need to be held and understandings, and I think cyber is just going to be one of those that is incorporated into how you manage the equipment. Cyber is going to be an aspect of that with the way it's integrated. So now it's just how do we approach that in a reasonable fashion.
And there would be certain certificates / licenses that probably you wouldn't find it reasonable. I'm just thinking here of, does a beautician or a barber need to know cybersecurity? So would you want to condition their license on passing some sort of cybersecurity test, or having a certificate that says that they've taken a class or something? But there are probably other certifications that do seem to be ones where you can make it a requirement. I think you'd have to,
if you applied the critical infrastructure sector filter to that, it might help.
Yeah, that probably is a good place to start. Yeah.
And there's other avenues, you know, like we just heard from Jeff Janista in the incident response and disruption response subcommittee, you know, about some of the resources they have for doing training and things like that too. And again, just linking those up, you know, with the other partners, the localities and critical infrastructure, is just more resources they have available to them. And again, that messaging piece, because again, every time we talk to DHS, they're developing more and more tools and resources that are available to those organizations at no cost. It's just a matter of coordinating, collaborating, sharing that out. So I think there's some pieces into that as well, I think.
Anything else with the near term? Should I scroll down to long term?
I don't have anything else near term.
I haven't gone through this document, so I'm just going to have to ask, do we have a section addressing the alignment of this effort with existing efforts like the DHS grant program that we talked about earlier today.
I do not think we do have that.
And that might not be the only program that's out there, but we probably need to make some statement about maintaining alignment with other programs so that we're optimizing effort as opposed to duplicating effort. Because I see as the DHS grant program morphs to that 7.5% and or 25% level, there's going to be a need for alignment because we could easily duplicate effort, and we don't want to do that with these scarce dollars.
So I know in kind of that long one, we start talking about partnering with these organizations. Is this where we kind of put in there and continuously identify new organizations, kind of to what Jay had mentioned, that are out there? I mean, obviously, I kept it, pretty small and then just said others, but do we start trying to incorporate as many in there as possible now, or do we kind of wait and build a list and kind of maybe put an annex or an appendix at the end of the list of potential partners?
Yeah, I would not try and list everybody in there. I would just use the more generic or broad term of others. And then if we wanted to come up with a list that we could then annex in a later report, that would be fine. But I think for the initial report, we would just want to say and others, because at this point, we don't know how many others may be out there. I mean, we came up with 2 or 3 more just today. There may be half a dozen more out there. So we don't want to make it look like we're all inclusive at the initial report, because we probably aren't.
Well, and we haven't gone down the path of identifying other state agencies that need to be considered in the program as well. The one that comes to my mind right now is KDOT and the cybersecurity of the various systems that they manage.
Yeah, and the other big parts, the KCC and things like that. Again, any of those other outreach arms that could serve as vehicles, to the various, again, that's one of the challenges, we see is we have so many different entities that have their own specific relationships with certain, for example, departments within a county. There's just no one overarching path, et cetera, to hear things through. So.
Jeff, just figuring this out could keep you employed for the next 30 years.
This is a very complex problem, and it will require a lot of brain power, and that's not going to be just me. Anything on the ones on the screen?
One question I had, Jeff, is for long-term goal 4. Is there, I guess right now, is there a possibility to maybe, like, does the state of Kansas have mandatory cyber awareness training?
So yeah, so there's actually 2 levels of governance on that. There is one in the Kansas Cybersecurity Act that mandates all executive branch employees take cybersecurity awareness training. And there is actually that ITech state level governance that mandates anybody within state level government to include all 3 branches, and also the regents institutions require their staff take cybersecurity awareness training. And that policy then can permeate the contracts that they must abide by the state security standards and require it through that avenue. So there's some vehicles to try and capture a wider audience and cast a bigger net, but it doesn't necessarily cover, like I said, the localities and critical infrastructure components.
Okay. Yeah, because I was going to ask, probably question is twofold. One, what the appetite would be to look to expand some of those programs to local government entities, if maybe loop them in on a broader service plan or shared service agreement, something like that.
And I think some of that goes back to, opening all contracts to subdivisions. For example, the state does have a security awareness training contract with a vendor of a solution, and we have opened that to political subdivision. We have seen a lot of uptake from a couple counties and municipalities here within Kansas leveraging it. But again, that kind of goes back to how do we communicate? We have these tools, would there be a bigger appetite to, not putting an unfunded mandate on ourselves, but providing that out and actually administering it for the counties and localities, and finding who bears the burden of that cost, or do we use some grant funding to that? And it's, we get people to self-enroll, and then we just build the material on an annual basis. So there's some options type thing, but might kind of dig into that a little bit further in ways we might be able to cover that here for our next set of recommendations.
Okay.
One thing that brought to mind the discussion about cyber awareness training. There's some of us who enjoy almost continuous cyber awareness training because of all the different requirements from different organizations. As we develop cyber awareness training, it would be probably good if we somehow kept an eye out for some synergy in accepting other training if it meets our level of requirements, as an effort to reduce the demand on our people having to take training multiple times a year for the same thing.
Yeah, definitely that kind of reciprocity type thing almost, and developing the structures around that. So that's something we try and do within the state as well, with various means. If one agency is doing something and it's up to standard, there isn't a reason why we should be asking them to do it again just for our sake, etc. So we agreed. So that was the list. Are there things you see we're missing? Based on discussions we've had, to add in terms of recommendations. There's some new ones that have come out just with our conversation today. You think we should add in there?
One other question I had, Jeff, was, does the state have a way of seeing high level data from those training results?
Yeah, so at least on the executive branch level, my organization administers it, so I can see that. Now I can't see, like I said, the way our contract is written with the vendors, the counties and municipalities, they can just buy out that agreement, so they buy their own basically tenants, so they're running and administering it themselves. So
Okay.
So I don't have any purview into those others that are leveraging the same platform, but they're allowed to go buy off on their own tenant with our vendor.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. I think we had that conversation on Monday just about visualizing risk. And I think some of those results of like the actual training exercises might be a good way to visualize like the scoring. And it might be an interesting way to visualize risk and kind of maybe look towards future funding or increased funding, things like that. But that's probably a conversation for a different group.
John, I can tell you that when I was with the KCC and we developed our own training, the statistics really were helpful. The first go around on fishing, we caught a lot of fish. The second one, fewer, and on the last one that I recall, we caught almost no fish. So the statistics really were kind of impressive about, okay, it's really easy training, and the awareness that easy training brought to everybody really cut down the exposure to potential harm. I don't know well, I know I have not seen any statistics now that I'm at the AG's office. That doesn't mean they don't exist, but I haven't seen them. Of course, Jeff, I think now we've kind of gone with the OITS program, and I don't know, does the program provide that information back to the AG's office?
Yes, we will. And typically, kind of bigger picture, we do ad hoc. So if you request one, we'll run one, but typically we try and do every year a big campaign against the entire environment, and then build metrics to address how effective our training has been, over the course of years. So kind of that model you're alluding to, what KCC does, we do across the board. So yes, we can provide that.
And you push those stats out to the agencies so they can see it?
Yep.
Okay.
So.
In terms of your earlier question, if I understood it correctly, yes, I think we should kind of update the list that we have in front of us. No, I don't have any others that I can think of right now. I think it's been a good discussion about additional possibilities here. So I think they should be added in.
I'm going over my notes from earlier to see if we can kind of we have some language that's vaguely in there about kind of the partnerships. I don't know what the group's thought is in being more explicit in saying when they talk about them having the conferences or the webinars, saying that we should seek to participate in those type of things, or just kind of leave it as kind of last one, to just furthering relationships and partnerships with the organizations. Do we start getting that explicit, saying some of the actions we should take to build those partnerships, or kind of leave it vague?
Jeff, where does it say about participating? I don't see that.
Long-term, or is it long-term? Yeah, long-term one, or it says partner alongside with organizations like League. Do we start kind of getting explicit in what those partnership actions should be here, or is that something we continue to develop, or just kind of?
So I thought that started out as being a mechanism for us to develop distribution program for communications and alerts, warnings, and the like.
Yes.
Am I correct in that?
I think that's where it did start. Yes.
So one thing I'd like to interject on that, along that line at this point, I've been kind of in a quandary in trying to think about how we send out alerts to the various organizations across the state based on their size and their capability. Because if, as one of the gentlemen talked about earlier, if you have a city that doesn't even have a building, their cybersecurity posture is going to be a lot different than a large metropolitan city with a large IT staff. I wonder if we aren't going, if it won't be ideal for us to stratify our communications in classes that more matches what their capabilities and interests are. I know going back to the certificates, based on the size of the city, the size of the system you were running, determine what level of certificate that you needed to maintain. And this kind of follows along that same line. And it would also help us filter the communication, because if I was going to send out an alert on a specific programmable logic controller, if a municipality doesn't even have that complex of a system, communications like that is going to be viewed as spam very quickly. So if we try to build a stratified system that prevents us from spamming them with such communication, we should, but we also need to figure out how to elevate those entities when they do, when their organizational maturity raises and they can and do want to get that kind of communication. Does that make sense?
No, that does. And that's kind of going to the point of providing appropriate actionable information / intelligence, other than just the information dump that becomes noise and ignoring. So,
but is that something that we want to do, or do we want to engage with like Kansas Municipal Utilities and let them worry about what level we push the notification to them? They in turn can push it out to whoever has the appropriate level of equipment for that notice. I mean, we could probably do that, but I think you're taking on a much bigger project onto the state maybe than you need to.
Well, I agree with you. I agree with you, Jay. But I think that we should probably define the structure, and then push it out to them.
Well, yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Just for consistency.
Sure. Because it could apply to working with the co-ops as well. There may be some co-ops that just are too small to worry about it, but there are definitely co-ops that are bigger that would need to worry about something the same as a larger municipal utility might.
Well, and if we define the structure and the levels, once we establish communication and a dialogue with those entities, then and identify what the available levels are, they can sign up for what they want to receive.
Yeah,
possibly.
That's going to be the long pole in the tent on that, is just, again, trying to develop that framework. That is going to probably be the hardest lift with that. But I do think the appropriate model is letting some of those other organizations handle the direct communication. Because they can better probably manage that and manage those closer relationships. So,
well, just from past experience, I know that a lot of folks feel very close to the league or the Association of Counties, and they don't necessarily feel quite that close to the state of Kansas.
Yeah, that's kind of why I was trying to get the temperature of what their thoughts are of the state. Because again, we want to serve here is, hey, if you have an issue, while we are the state, we're looking out for the citizens and want to help any way we can, whether it's at the local level or not, or the state level. We got to approach this, all as one. So
yeah, and again, I think that's a good idea. It's just having worked with a lot of small towns over the years, they just feel like anybody from the state really isn't there to help them, even if we are. They're just leery of it, and they'd pick up the phone and call the League of Municipalities and say, hey, what about this? So I agree with you. I think it would be good for the league and the association to be actively involved with the exercise.
So would it make sense kind of along that line? And again, I'm also going to kind of ping John on this about experiences in other states. Do we put something in here as just kind of that collaboration rapport building is probably critical, explicitly calling that out as one of the efforts that the state needs to undertake, to reach out and, become that, through building rapport, become that police organizations that they can reach out to and trust, and feel like they're looking out for them, just not there to be bureaucracy. Would that be something that we should explicitly call out?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to, I think that could be a good add-on to one of the long-term goals. I think just with the long-term goal of increasing trust between state government, local counterparts, increasing awareness of the different services that the state can provide, the different resources that the state has to provide, and just creating some sort of environment where there is information flow. And I think, a lot of states have looked at just that very basic thing of just like, very simple, something as simple as let's have a regular way of trying to establish communication flows with local counterparts, and have that be like an actual goal to strive towards, just because it doesn't exist. So I think, I don't think that would be off base within this. And maybe one of the things that I may have missed joining late, but that near-term 1 goal right below all this, that create a position within the state government to focus on that communication, relationship building. Are you thinking, would this group envision that to be something similar to like a navigator position?
Yeah, that's something I would kind of equate it to, or just, managing these and trying to facilitate conversations is going to be a full-time job for somebody.
Yeah.
And so call a cyber navigator, cyber liaison almost, to kind of help have that dialogue, go out and make the phone call, and really.
Yeah, that's been, the election side has seen that really take off.
That's kind of where I got the idea for the recommendation. I know it's Illinois has that big navigators program.
Yeah, Illinois theirs is kind of really the gold standard. They have 9 separate navigators, 8 regional ones split across 4 different regions in the state, and then 1 central one. They work with all their local election. So they work with the local county clerks, and then they work with the county IT officials. So it's not necessarily the election officials at the county level. but they walk them through risk assessments. They're essentially their kind of go-to person if any of those local folks have any questions about anything cyber related. And it's been pretty helpful for them to kind of build relationships between them and the state. But the one thing in other states, when they've been doing it too, they've been using HAVA funds, and those are strictly for the use of election specific purposes. So I'm not sure but I, like speaking informally with some of those states, I know they do see the spillover effect to be quite significant. Even if it's not necessarily an election specific cybersecurity incident, there is, having someone at the state level that these local officials can call up pretty quickly and get some thoughts on has been helpful. I think it just becomes a question of recognizing how to actually, what funding stream to actually leverage for that. And there's
I think what you just,
oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, I think you just described a challenge that we have in comparing ourselves to Illinois, because 9 people who are paid to do nothing but work with county clerks and elections across the state, that can be done in a highly populated state that would have lots of federal type funding distributed to them. Then you rock it out here to Kansas, where we're 2% of the total population. I think it's going to be really hard to secure any kind of funds for that level of immersion in the counties in general, let alone elections. So, can you comment on that notion?
Yeah, that's a good point. And when I said Illinois is they're the gold standard for that, that's a model that is, it's kind of it's the ideal. I don't know if it's highly replicable for other states, just given like you said, kind of not every state is going to be able to employ that many folks. But other states have looked to do it with one person. So like Minnesota used the HAVA funding as well for someone to essentially a navigator. It's one navigator. They're staffed in the Secretary of State's office, but they're responsible for all the counties across the state of Minnesota. And I know that.
Could you spell out that acronym, HAVA?
Oh, sorry, Helping America Vote Act.
So does Kansas have any HAVA funds?
They were directed to the Secretary of State's office. And mine, at
Secretary
least,
of State has it?
Yes, and my interpretation,
Okay.
Not my interpretation, my idea around this is more of not quite specifically to, they'll help you do the risk assessments, but is really more the liaison of here resources that are available to you. If you have issues, you can call us and we can try and coordinate and align, kind of almost like what we do with some of the emergency management folks, just doing the outreach to them. Kind of similar model to that, except just kind of a better understanding of the cyber aspect. Might be something where we could use some of the Homeland Security grant stuff and just hire a contractor to do some of that, et cetera. So there's ways that we can.
So the HAVA funds.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying the HAVA funds are being consumed in Kansas for general election support, and not really historically been available for, or would be available for, cybersecurity.
They can use them for cybersecurity, but it has to be directed at elections infrastructure.
Correct.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is it hasn't been in the past because they've been consumed by other demands of that function.
I said that we don't have any purview from my perspective of what they've used them for.
Yeah, they could be, those HAVA funds could be used for anything from setting something up like a cyber navigator program to I think even in this past year, they were used to buy additional envelopes for mailing ballots out. So it's very, there's broad uses for it, but it's in the sense that when it comes to election purposes, but there is, it specifically has to be for election specific purposes. And then it would be, like Jeff said, it's all administered by the Secretary of State or the election director, whoever is running the elections in that state.
But there's other opportunities for other grants that we could possibly leverage. So it's just,
And yeah, Jeff, to your point, I think HSGP, the Homeland Security program, the Homeland Security grant program, those fundings, that the one issue there is that I think those are just a much smaller percentage. So I think cybersecurity cutout for that is, I think it increased this year, but it's still very small.
I don't think you guys have jumped on yet, but in Kansas, yeah, it increased to 7.5%, but the HSA has mandated that it be funded at 25%. And so the regional managers for that funding are grappling with that change in investment. And so that's why we have been talking a little bit more about being able to use them for these efforts.
and that's too, is the challenge is making sure, somebody's kind of organizing and tracking what a lot of, so, there's benefits to procuring assessments in bulk, more or less, because cybersecurity assessments are relatively expensive, but if you buy them in bulk, like other things, they get cheaper per use type thing. So there's models like that, and don't want to necessarily duplicate if we don't have to, things like that. And so there's a lot of opportunities in doing some coordination around that. And so I kind of see that as a role of this position, or, that cybersecurity grant coordinator type thing. Again, for as big geographically as Kansas is, a number of counties and what they said, municipalities and stuff, it's probably more than just one person can handle. But I think there's opportunity. So,
and I think too, this is also an area where I think we're still looking to see where the federal government goes with their cyber liaisons within the state. I think there's some potential for that role to be a good connective tissue between state, local, critical infrastructure, and federal. But I think it's just too early to tell right now. And I know Jeff, to your point about some of the other funding areas, I think also there's going to be some interest in how some of these pending cyber grant programs for SLTTs that are currently in Congress, what those are going to look like, and if any of those might be eligible spend use for any of these purposes. So that's something to monitor. And then, some states have looked at using the National Guard on some of these local, kind of on the prevention side, different assessments, training, and not trainings, but just assessments, essentially risk assessments, vulnerability assessments, and then some sort of consultation after the fact there. And they've looked to be kind of flexible with some of that. So I don't know if that would be of interest or an option, but kind of depends on existing MOUs and what duty status they'd be under and things like that.
My understanding in Kansas, our DCLE team is in place, but they're still working on the appropriate authorities to grant them authority to further work with the private sector. But yeah, they're working really hard on that, but there is some challenges.
I do know is obviously with any sorts of assessments and stuff is addressing the liability concerns. So
yeah, it's a big one.
So working through that is one of the biggest challenges we have at the moment. So.
John, just to confirm, did you say SLTTs?
I did, yeah, state, local, territorial, and tribal government. Or territorial, tribal. I always mix up the order there. And for some context, Sarah, that's the in the infrastructure bill right now, there's a program for state and local cybersecurity program. That's the one I was referring to. It's a 4-year pot of money.
I do know that DHS has tried to hire a cybersecurity advisor, a CSA for Kansas. So that would be, I think that position was going to be stationed in Topeka, but they have not yet been able to fill that position. And so if they could get that position filled, that would be one of our federal resources across the entire state from CISA at least.
Thoughts or feedback. Start wrapping up. Things popped up. I know there's definitely more to continue refining for the next iteration of the report, and I know we'll continue to weed out additional recommendations to add to. But for the sake of this document, anything else we're missing or like to adjust? We'll take these back and go refine the recommendations a bit and hopefully get them back out to the subcommittee here shortly to review. And like I said, give kind of that subcommittee consensus before presenting it to the full task force for approval into the report. We are hoping, that meeting will be a little bit longer, but hopefully we shouldn't have to take too much of your time. We'll probably give you some back here today just to steal it next week. So.
Just a quick note, if it's okay, Jeff, on the extended meeting for next week. I know not everybody has had a chance to respond to the doodle poll. And ideally we'll send out that calendar invite by this afternoon, just so it's on everyone's calendar. So if basically just as soon as this information is over, if you can go back to that email I sent when I sent over the documents for today, there should be a link to the doodle poll in there if you could fill that out. Hopefully within the next 15-20 minutes, if you get that filled out real quick, and that way I can get the calendar invite out to everybody.
Yeah, sorry, Allie, I missed that in the email. I see it now, but I missed it when I first read the email.
Oh, that's okay. I promise.
Yeah.
There are a handful of folks.
It's just
I'm
how we go
remiss
fishing.
as well.
Sure, I made the same plug on the previous task force meeting, so don't worry. No one here is
Okay.
being singled out, or at least please don't feel that way.
I appreciate everyone's time and appreciate everyone's input. I know it's like you said, Jay, this is a monumental task, and we're hopefully starting to chip away at it and kind of, moving that next step, moving the needle to better protecting the state as a whole. So, I appreciate everyone's feedback and time. Unless there's anything else, I think that probably can conclude today's meeting.